Just over a month ago, a video went viral on the internet that exposed a shocking fraud scheme by Somali nationals in Minnesota. An organization that went by the name of Quality Learning Center, or Quality Leering Center, as they misspelled it, was receiving massive amounts of federal funding, by some estimates more than $1 million, under the pretext of providing childcare. However, as the video shows, the facility was not in fact a daycare center, and there were no children present. The mainstream media may have moved on from this scandal, but our job here in Congress on this scandal is not done. Matter of fact, it's just beginning. I applaud President Trump and his administration for quickly freezing federal child care funds to Minnesota in the wake of this alleged fraud scheme. This will give government officials a chance to conduct a thorough investigation to find out exactly what was going on before more money is shoveled out the door to potential swindlers. These are U.S. taxpayer dollars, and they were intended to fund a program to help make child care more accessible to those who needed it. Instead, these tax dollars are lining the pockets of a group of charlatans and fraudsters. Now, the radical left, of course, has villainized the young independent journalist who uncovered this scandal, calling for his death on social media. They've accused him of, quote, bringing ICE to Minnesota, and put up posters encouraging people to tell him to kill himself if they see him. But as we all know, the American people voted in record numbers last fall for President Trump, who ran on a program of immigration enforcement. And we all know that what President Trump says he means, and he'll follow through on. I don't think there was ever a doubt in the minds of the American people about where Donald Trump stood on illegal immigration. If anyone is responsible for bringing ICE to Minnesota, it would be the criminal aliens who came into the country illegally, and the feckless politicians, including President Joe Biden, who refused to enforce our immigration laws. President Trump is simply keeping his word to the American people who elected him. But the notion that this young man should be somehow ashamed for shining a light on this fraud that occurs in Minnesota is simply absurd. The mainstream media, once again, is failing the test of objectivity. It is not telling the truth about who ICE is targeting, particularly the criminal aliens, including fraudsters, that were responsible for this scandal. This deception encourages left-wing radicals to target young men, young journalists like Nick Shirley. Well, Mr. President, it's important to note that the fraud scheme at Quality Learning Center is hardly an isolated case. The state of Minnesota has been under federal investigation on multiple occasions for fraud schemes with federal taxpayer dollars. In 2022, the Department of Justice investigated a Minnesota nonprofit, non-governmental organization, NGO, known as Feeding Our Future. The department ultimately charged 47 defendants associated with Feeding Our Future for participating in a massive fraud scheme. These defendants took advantage of taxpayer-funded programs intended to provide food for needy children and used it to enrich themselves, buying luxury cars, jewelry, and vacation properties in other countries. More recently, last September 8, defendants were charged by the federal government with participating in a housing stabilization fraud scheme. That same month, another woman was charged for participating in a fraud scheme involving an autism program. This woman was also participating in the Feeding Our future fraud scheme and allegedly stole nearly $500,000. There's clearly a problem here and a pattern. When describing the full extent of fraud cases in Minnesota, this is what one federal prosecutor said. He said, "What we see are schemes stacked upon schemes, draining resources meant for those in need. It feels never ending. I have spent my career as a fraud prosecutor, and the depth of the fraud in Minnesota takes my breath away." Well, while the state of Minnesota has a long-standing history of widespread fraud, we'd be foolish to assume that this is an isolated event, and it's high time for Congress to address it. These instances of fraud are illegal diversion of federal tax dollars, so it should be of concern to all taxpayers, not just those in the state of Minnesota. In the last year, we've seen dozens of arrests, charges, and convictions of illegal aliens who committed public benefit and other types of fraud all across America. For this reason, as chair of the Judiciary Subcommittee on Immigration and Border Security, I'm hosting a hearing tomorrow entitled "Somali Fraud in Minnesota, the Tip of the Iceberg." In this hearing, we will begin by examining the most recent case of child care fraud in Minnesota, but we will not limit our inquiry to this recent scandal that has dominated the headlines. We'll also go a step further and look at the long-standing endemic cases of fraud committed by illegal aliens all over the United States. We'll hear from several witnesses, including Rebecca Gambler, Chief Quality Officer and Managing Director of Audit Policy and Quality Assurance with the Government Accountability Office. She'll be able to offer GAO's perspective on these long-standing abuses of taxpayer dollars. Simon Hankinson, a former Foreign Service officer who currently serves as a research fellow on border security and immigration at the Heritage Foundation, will also testify. We'll hear from another Foreign Service officer, Philip Linderman, who's now a fellow at the Ben Franklin Fellowship. And finally, Matt O'Brien, Deputy Director at the Federation for American Immigration Reform, or FAIR, will speak to this issue. All of these witnesses will help us get a better handle on the full breadth of the problem posed by illegal immigration and the aliens who are abusing our country's welfare system in order to send money back home to their home countries. But let me be clear, it's not racist or xenophobic to target fraud wherever it's found. Fraud's not a victimless crime, and neither is identity theft. And Democrat attempts to deflect discussions of fraud are an injustice to the victims of these crimes, which happen to be all the American taxpayers. Furthermore, these incidents raise questions about the prevalence of government grants and contracts to non-governmental organizations. For us here in Congress, we'll consider whether it is wise to continue to dole out funds to non-governmental organizations without sufficient accountability mechanisms in place. Recently, I introduced the Stop Fraud by Strengthening Oversight and More Accountability for Lying and Illegal Activity Act, or Stop Fraud by Somalia Act, to amend the Child Care and Development Block Grant Program and impose strict penalties on child care providers who commit fraud. But as we know, this issue touches virtually every industry. It's nothing short of an insult to the generosity of the American taxpayer that aliens are able to enter the country and enrich themselves by taking advantage of federal programs that are intended to help needy Americans. Hardworking American citizens who pay taxes to the U.S. government deserve accountability for how their dollars are being spent. And tomorrow's hearing will help shine a light on just how rampant this abuse is. Mr. President, I look forward to tomorrow's hearing so we can get to the root of this rampant abuse that's happening not just in Minnesota, but all over the country, and begin to take concrete and positive steps to stop it.